Hey friends, this is Arie of Pups Unleashed, and in this video I will be covering everything you need to know to crate train your dog. This video is appropriate for dogs of all ages, so whether you have a puppy, adolescent, or adult dog, this video will cover all the steps that you need to know to properly crate train them. The first topic I want to touch on is just what is a crate and how do you use it. So a crate is essentially a den that you create for your dog in your house. Dogs are den animals, so naturally they do like to have a place where they can just go to be alone, a place that they know is only their safe space, no one's gonna mess with them, and it's excellent for containment in situations where you need your dog to stay in one spot for safety reasons as well. There are many different types of crates out there on the market. Typically what you see are just traditional wire crates, which I will show you a bunch of different sizes tonight, but there are plenty of other options out there. There are some really nice wood ones if you want to spend a lot of money on them. There are soft crates if you do have a smaller dog or a dog that is less likely to try to escape, but the majority of them are just metal and you probably have one at home or you have at least seen one. There are many scenarios where it's incredibly useful to use a crate. There are also some situations with your dog where you should never use a crate. So let's talk about that briefly before we go any further. So great situations to use a crate would be things like if you need to keep your front door open of your house. So for example, you're moving furniture or groceries in and out. You are having guests come over and your dog gets really worked up and overexcited if they're allowed to greet the guests right at the door. Crating during arrivals is an excellent option to keep your dog safe and calm, and then once they settle in their crate, they can be let out and they'll be a lot less over the top with your guests. There are also some emergency situations where it's awesome to have a crate trained dog. For example, if there's ever an emergency in your home and you have to have a first responder come out, it is essential that you have a crate trained dog in those circumstances because they are likely to get very upset in a stressful situation, and to make everything safer for everyone, it's very useful to have a crate. There are also some times where you shouldn't use a crate. A crate is never a punishment. So it's used for confinement for safety reasons or, maybe some other justifiable reason like your dog is overly excited when guests come over, but it's not a punishment. So just be mindful of when you use it. If there's a situation where you're planning on yelling at your dog and putting him in the crate and slamming the door, that's no good. That is using it as a punishment, and it should always be a positive space because if you crate train your dog properly, it should be the happiest place in the world for them. It's their safe spot where no one's going to mess with them and they can go to be alone and cozy. So any situation where you can use it in a positive way like that is great, and then any situation that it could potentially be perceived as a punishment is not a good situation to use a crate because we don't want to poison the crate when it really is your dog's favorite spot. Before you actually start the crate training process, you have to first pick a crate, and there are some important considerations to make when choosing your crate. The first thing that you want to think about is the size of the crate. If you have an adult dog, this is a little bit easier than a puppy because puppies are always growing. So you're either going to have to buy a larger crate that has a divider, and most crates do come with these dividers, so you can change the size of the crate. Or what you can do is buy several crates as your puppy gets older, but that's going to be a lot more expensive. So if you have a dog that's not full grown, I usually recommend you get one that is expandable so you're not buying a new one as they start growing through their first year. When you're trying to decide what size crate is right for your dog, you want a crate that is big enough that your dog can stand up, sit down, and turn around easily. They can relax and stretch out, but no bigger than that. Because if your crate is so large that your dog has basically enough space that they can do full laps around it, they can walk around, they have different areas, then sometimes what they do is they pick a sleeping area and a bathroom area. And that's not really a good situation for anyone if your dog is soiling the crate. So make sure they have enough space to be comfortable, but not so much space that you're basically giving them another house. Another thing you want to consider when you're picking your crate is the material for your crate. Most crates, and the ones that you will see here, are just standard wire crates. They typically have a plastic bottom as well so that you can sanitize them easily, but there are other styles of crates available For example, if you have a very large, very strong dog, there are some crates that are made of thicker metal and then reinforced with really hard industrial plastic. On the other side, there's also soft crates that are made entirely of fabric and mesh. Those are usually only appropriate for very small dogs and dogs that are not planning on escaping, so I don't typically recommend them. But usually wire crates, just standard wire crates, are the way to go. If you want to put in usually a lot of extra money, but you want something that looks really nice, there are crates that are made of wood, and essentially they just look like a really nice piece of furniture in your home. They are considerably more expensive, but they're very, very nice looking if you want something that blends into the furniture of your home instead of looks like a dog crate. Before you actually start crate training your dog, there's a lot of things that you can do to make the crate more comfortable and exciting for your dog. So that will make the actual training process all the more easy. So the first thing that we should really do in this situation is make the crate more cozy by putting some sort of comfortable bottom on it. So this is a situation where you really need to know your dog, because there are really great fluffy crate pads you can get, but they're pretty expensive. So if your dog loves to shred fabric, it's probably not the way to start as far as crate bedding when you first start crate training your dog. So if that's the case, I would recommend something like an old beach towel or an old sheet, old blankets, until you see how your dog really responds to having crate bedding in there. And then if they don't ever do any sort of shredding, buy the expensive crate bed. But it's something that you can usually just find around the house if you want to see what kind of thing you could put in there. So I like to use old blankets because we always have a bunch around and we have a lot of dogs, and it's easy to put them in the washer when they get dirty. So all you want to do is cover as much of the bottom of the crate as possible with something cozy. Now this, of course, is assuming that your dog likes to be on a cozy floor. If you have a dog that has really long, fluffy fur, like maybe a Malamute, they might not want a super fuzzy bottom because it might make them too hot. So this is where you want to know your dog as far as what might be best. But if you have no idea, old blanket, it's the way to go. So something like this is what you would have as far as bedding in your crate. Once you make the bottom of the crate more comfortable for your dog by putting some bedding in there, the next thing that you want to do is cover all sides of the crate except for the front. Because as you can imagine, if your dog was in a crate with no cover on it, they might feel exposed and confined, which is not a good combination. We want them to feel cozy when they're in their crate, not exposed to the world. So old blanket, old sheet, crate cover, they all work great. So if you cover all sides except for the front, then your dog can see out, but they do feel like they're completely enclosed in a little den. And then something to be mindful of if you have multiple dogs in your home and you're crating all of them, usually I recommend that you give them some space between their crates. I have these next to each other just for the sake of demonstration and for space, but when my dogs are actually all crated together in the same room, their crates are not touching because I don't want them to feel like they're forced to be super close together if they don't want to be at that time, because they don't really have control over that in the crate. So I like to make sure they each have their own space with their covered crates. So as you can see, it's a lot more cozy now. We have all the sides covered, there's soft bedding in there, and something you can do to really make this even more comfortable to your dog is to put their favorite toys in there. At some point throughout the day, they're probably looking for their toys, so if they happen to find them in their crate, that's a great thing, because then they start to learn that good things come from the crate. And then another thing to do with these prepped crates is to put some little pieces of food in there every once in a while, little pieces of treats or little pieces of kibble. Do it when your dog isn't watching. That way, when they happen to be randomly looking around throughout the day for something to do, chances are they're going to stumble in their crate at some point, and it's great if there's little bits of food in there, because again, it's just reinforcing that this is a positive space, this is a good area to be, which will make the actual crate training part much easier for you. So keep your crate comfortable, keep it covered, and put all the best things in there so that your dog can come and go and find really awesome stuff in there as they're getting used to the crate. A few other tips for making these crates the most comfortable spot in the world for your dogs would be things like putting them in an area where your dogs still have an idea of what's going on if they're crated, but they're not in such a high traffic area that it's stressful. So good rooms tend to be living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms. Somewhere like the entryway of your home is probably too high traffic. Somewhere like a basement or a garage is probably too removed, and then you also might have a temperature issue there as well, depending on the setup of your home. So you want it somewhere like living room, bedroom, dining room. Those tend to be better spots for these crates, so they have some idea of what's going on there. Some other tips for using these crates as well would be make sure your dog has always had a walk prior to crating them, so you're not worried about them having to hold their bladder for too long when they're in here, because the last thing you want is them to be worried about that every time they go in the crate. You want them to be comfortable when they go in the crate. And you can also feed your dog their meals in the crate. And if you have a dog that is soiling the crate and it's something like a puppy situation where they haven't learned that this is a living space yet, a great way to teach them it's a living space is by feeding them directly in the crate on the floor of the crate. So you can just measure out their kibble and you can just dump it in the bottom of their crate, assuming the crate is clean, and they can eat it right off of that crate bedding, which is a good way to teach them that this is an area that's a living space. And once a dog gets that about any particular area, they're very unlikely to soil it. So it's really, really useful when you're crate training your puppy and house training your puppy at the same time, because a properly crate trained puppy is actually going to move through house training quicker usually, because you have a containment option for them when you can't have eyes on them. And if a puppy is having accidents all over your house, they're a lot harder to crate train, or to house train rather, than a puppy that you can put in a crate when you can't keep eyes on them 100% of the time. There are a lot of different training methods you can use to get your dog used to the crate. What I'm going to show you here is a method called the Crate Game by Dr. Patricia McConnell. It's my own adaptation of her crate training protocol, but it's one that I find to be pretty easy to implement and pretty effective. So this is the Crate Game, and here's how it works. So the early steps of teaching your dog how to be used to their crate really involve just teaching your dog to go in and out of the crate without any sort of containment as the ultimate goal. So the way this works is you're just going to take some sort of high value training food, like I have some little pepperoni here, and all you would do is you would show your dog that you have a piece of that food. Dar, okay, what up, buddy? And then you would just throw it in the crate. Yes, good girl. As soon as they go in, you're just gonna say yes, so they know that they did the right thing. And then just let them come out. You don't have to keep them in there for any sort of chunk of time. We're not closing the door. We're just teaching them that going in is likely going to get them something. Yes, good girl. Yes, good girl. So there's no sort of containment. Just play this game for a while until you notice that your dog is happily running in and out of that crate without any sort of hesitation. And then once you see that, you can move to the next step. And the next step would be usually adding a cue word. Like I like to say crate, just so when my dogs hear that, they know it means go to your crate. So it would look very similar. Okay, come on, buddy. Come on, you can do it. Come on, Apple. Crate. Good girl, Ripley. Come here. Crate. This guy loves this crate. He doesn't even want to get out of it. Crate. Yes. As soon as they get in there, say yes, and then you can throw in that little piece of food. If they don't go in before you throw the food, for a while you can say the word crate and then throw the food in. And then as they get really, really good at it, you can give them the food once they go in. But we're just, again, getting them used to being in the crate without any sort of hesitation. Once they get really good at that, then what we're going to start to do is just close the door for only a second at a time and feed them a little piece of food through the door. So they learn that when the door closes, they're still likely to get a reward, which is important. Great. And then open it up again. So feed through the door. Good job. And then open it up again so they can come out if they want. If your dog is like this one right here and loves to be in there, there's no harm in just letting them stay in there as you play this game. If they like to pop in and out like these two do, that's fine too. What we're looking for is that they're not upset about going into the crate in the first place. They're doing it freely, they're doing it happily. Once your dog gets comfortable running in the crate and getting a piece of food through the door, then what you're going to do is practice locking the crate. So they go in there, watch your tail, girl, close it up, and then give the reward. So you can see these little incremental steps. And then open it up, let them out. So close. This one's the escape artist. As you can see, she knows how to put her paws through and bat it open. Good job, and then let them out. So this process is getting them used to hearing a closing door and then knowing that it doesn't necessarily mean the rewards are gone. The rewards are still potentially coming. Once your dog is comfortable doing this, then we really have to up the ante. So you want to take a break and you want to get a Kong for this next set of steps. Regular training food's not going to do it. The next step for crate training your dog is super fun if you can't tell, because these guys are already ready to go. They know what's happening. So you want a stuffed Kong or something similar to a Kong. And in these, I have some non-fat Greek yogurt and peanut butter mixed together, and then I slathered the whole inside of it, and I froze it. So these will take a while to get through because it's frozen, which is perfect because we need time to be able to get through this process. So let's start out the same way as before. We're going to crate our dogs, and then we're going to give them this Kong. So crate. Yes. Go ahead and lock it up. Great. Yes. Not that one, girl. Great. Yes. Once the Kong is in there, let them get going with it so they figure out what's inside of it. They know it's high value, so just give them a couple of seconds. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to walk just a couple of feet away, and then I'm going to come right back. So I'm just going to count about 5 seconds. And then I'm going to come on back. I'm going to praise. Yes, good job, buddy. I'm going to offer some food. Good boy. Good job. And then I'm going to let them out. And I'm just going to practice this with this one. That way, these guys can just keep going with their Kong, so I'm not taking 3 in and out. Once you retrieve that Kong, when you're retrieving, make sure you're always exchanging. I have delicious treats in this hand while I take this Kong. He also knows drop it as well, so I might say drop it to him. You want to make sure when you go in for that Kong, you're being mindful of your dog's body language. If they're guarding the Kong, that's where you walk away and let them just go at the Kong. If you hear any sort of growling or there's any sort of freezing or hard stare, eye contact, anything like that, it means he doesn't want you to take that Kong. But in this case, he's ready to go. He knows this game. He's played it before. So now that he's taken, or he has surrendered his Kong, I'm going to bring him out again. Okay, good boy. Great. Yes, good boy. I'm going to give him his Kong back. Lock it up again. I'm going to walk away. This time for maybe 10 seconds. And let's say I leave the room so he can't see me anymore. It's going to be quick. And then I would come on back. Good boy! Come on out! And then I would let him come out. And if I were continuing this process with him, I don't need to, he's been crate trained for a while now, but if I were continuing this process, what I would do is slowly stretch out the amount of time that my dog is in the crate with that Kong before I return back. And what this does is it teaches them that if I'm in the crate, I have this amazing Kong, please don't come back and open this door right now because I want to stay in here with this crate, or with this Kong rather. So it teaches your dog that good things come from the crate, and they are a lot less likely to be upset by you leaving if they are happy with the item they're left with. Just be mindful of using any sort of toy or feeder that could be a choking hazard. Definitely know your dog here. If you have a dog that can shred a Kong, don't leave them with a Kong. Not a lot of dogs can do that, but I absolutely have seen it before. So know your dog. If you think they'll shred a Kong while you're gone, obviously give them something that is not going to be a choking hazard. Safety should be number one in this type of situation. And then, there you go, girl. And then when you go to let your dogs out of the crate, I also like to do a release word, which is okay. Okay just means you're free to leave the crate. So it's up to you whether or not you use that, but my dogs use okay for releasing through doors, going outside, crossing streets. So I use that as a release for all sorts of things, and that's nice as well because instead of your dog bolting, they will calmly wait until you say that release word. And again, remember, if they're barking while they're in there, you have to let them settle. The last thing you want to do is teach them that barking means you're going to let them out, because then you will not be able to crate train a dog in a way that you can put him in there and have any sort of silence. The other thing that I recommend with this kind of exercise is don't always do it before you leave the house. Do this throughout the day. If you have the day off and you have a dog you're crate training, have little chunks of time throughout the day where you practice crating them. Maybe for 2 minutes at a time. Maybe for 5 minutes at a time. Maybe you have to go out, and then it's an hour. But you want to put them in the crate for random amounts of time so they don't always think that going in the crate means they're going to be in there for, a full work day or whatever that is. Use those little chunks of time as well so that they learn that it's not really always for containment for long periods of time. You might just need a couple of minutes to bring the groceries in. So that's about it for the steps of playing that crate game. You're going to start with, again, just letting your dog run in and out on their own, and then you're feeding through the door, and then you're keeping them in there for progressively longer chunks of time with their stuffed feeder. And again, remember, we're monitoring for safety. If it's something they could choke on, don't leave them in there with it. But if it's something that's just keeping them busy until they conk out and then they sleep till you get back, that's great. Now that we've gone through the basics, let's talk about some of the areas where you are more likely to have issues while crate training and what some of the potential fixes are for those problems. Probably the most common crating issue that I see and hear about is barking in the crate. And if you've tried to crate train your dog and you weren't successful and you gave up, this is probably why. Because barking in the crate is a very common issue. And you see this with puppies and adult dogs, so it really doesn't discriminate by age. Oftentimes, when a dog is barking a lot in the crate, it is because they have learned that barking in the crate gets them out of the crate. So if they show a little bit of mild distress, start barking, a lot of times as humans, we feel bad, so we let them out. What happens there is your dog learns that barking gets you to respond in some sort of way. And remember, dogs are masters of patterns. So if they learn the pattern is that they bark in crate and then you let them out of crate, they will bark in crate even more. So that's one of those behaviors that is a learned behavior. So it's a little bit tricky to deal with because what you have to do is teach your dog that barking in the crate doesn't get them out of the crate. So ideally you crate train slowly enough that this doesn't really crop up, but if you get to the point where you're crate training and then your dog's having a barky day in that crate, you cannot let them out while they're barking. Now that is assuming that it's not an emergency, assuming that they don't have to go to the bathroom, assuming that they don't have separation anxiety. This is just a dog that's barking in the crate because they don't want to be in the crate. When they do that, you must ignore. So do not tell them to be quiet. Do not yell at them. Do not get angry with them. Do not rattle the crate. Don't show any sort of response at all, because whether you're comforting them or you're yelling at them, both of those are responses that your dog perceives as you giving them attention, which is going to make them do it longer. So, long story short, if they bark in the crate, you must ignore. And you ignore until it stops. And then once the barking stops, then you can praise them and let them out. And what you will see over time is that the duration of that barking will decrease as your dog gets used to being in the crate, and they learn that being in the crate calmly is how they eventually will get out of the crate. That being said, when you're going through that process of basically letting them bark it out, if they happen to start barking, you might see something called an extinction burst, which is where your dog's been getting better and better and better with their barking, and then one day, all of a sudden, they're barking for twice as long as they did yesterday. It's called an extinction burst. It's part of the process of crate training. So when you see it, don't panic, stick to your guns, keep doing what you're doing. It actually means the process is working. And then what you will find is that if you continue to ignore during those extinction bursts, the duration of barking will then dramatically drop off again. And then you might see another burst again, and then it might go away. Just know that those bursts are part of the process, and stick to your guns and your dog will get it. Another issue that you might see in the crate, that's one that you definitely want to pay attention to, is soiling the crate. So by soiling, I mean the dog goes pee or poop in the crate while they're in there. And there are a lot of reasons why this can occur. So there are some things here that you want to examine if your dog has done this. Because if your dog is in the crate for too long and that's why they're soiling the crate, that's a problem, right? It means they're not getting adequate walks, or they're in there too long, or both. But if your dog is just soiling the crate because it's too big and they've learned that they can go to the bathroom on one side and still sit cozy on a bed on the other side, it just means the crate is not appropriately sized. And you have to make the crate a little smaller with a divider or get a different crate. A way that you can help determine why your dog is soiling the crate is to make sure that they always get a really great walk before they go into the crate. They've gone to the bathroom. That way you can at least rule out that they really need to go potty and that's why they had an accident. They just couldn't hold it. The other thing you want to look at is the age of your dog going into the crate. So if you have a puppy, there's a rule of thumb for, on average, how long they can stay in the crate without a potty break. And it is their age in months plus 1. That's the number of hours. So for example, if you have a 3-month puppy, they can be in a crate for roughly 4 hours. Now this is on average, without needing that potty break. So that's a good starting point for you when you start crate training, is look at the age of your dog in months, add 1, and that's the number of hours that is likely to be okay. That being said, every dog's an individual. Not every dog is going to have the same amount of strength in their bladder when they're in the crate, especially as a puppy, but that's a good starting point for you to play around with. And then the other thing to consider is if you have an adult dog, they really should not be in a crate for more than 8 hours at a time. So that's pretty much a work day if you go to work and they're crated. Really shouldn't be any longer than that, because at that point then you're running the risk that if they soil the crate, it's just because they haven't been out frequently enough. And you don't ever want to force a dog to soil in their crate because they've been in there too long. So if you have that soiling in the crate issue, take a look at all those variables. Is my dog upset about being in here? Are they in here too long? Or is the crate just too big? And there are some ways that you can help them get more comfortable in the crate, which we already spoke about, that might get you where you need to be. And finally, another issue, or really group of issues with crate training that you might see, is either breaking out of the crate or moving the crate. And if you have ever had a dog do this in your home, it is obviously a pretty scary situation to come home to, finding an empty crate, and then usually a dog that has destroyed something. Because ultimately, if a dog breaks out of the crate, they're probably very worked up by the time they get out, because it's not that easy to do. So if you have a dog that's an escape artist, first take a look at the type of crate you have. Sometimes if you have a plain wire crate, it's not enough and you need to get one of the reinforced ones that have really strong plastic in it. You can also use carabiner clips to clip the crate closed. One of my dogs is an escape artist, and she has learned that she can just stick her paw through, slam the latch, and it will pop right open. So if you use something like a carabiner to keep those latches closed, that will help the more clever dogs from being able to stick their paws through and just whack that latch right open there. And if your dog does something like knock over the crate, you can also secure the crate by either securing it to the ground or wedging it with furniture so that it can't potentially do something like fall over or flip and present a hazard to your dog. So overall, crate training your dog is something that I definitely think is worth the time and effort. It's a little bit easier to start out the right way and crate train a young puppy, but you can crate train a dog of any age. And if you crate train a dog properly, now not only do you have an excellent safe solution for containment when you need it, but your dog also has a place that is their den where they know that they can always retreat. If they are upset, if they are in pain, if they need their space, they know that they have that safe area as well. So it's useful for you, it's useful for them, so please take the time to do it properly. And if you struggle with it, definitely get connected with an ethical trainer in your area who can walk through the process with you. All right, folks, well, thanks for tuning in. We will have more new content coming out soon. So as always, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss all those amazing new videos. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.